Okay, let's start with project one. I want you on Monday to have a player move. Uh, there's 4 directions I'll work with, but I want at least 2. Change his skins, which means you have to go get a sprite sheet. Can't leave the screen. A background of some sort other than a single color. A stationary enemy and a projectile that destroys the enemy. So that is our goal for Monday. So let's run over how to do this. I've already created this program, so I'm going to run it and let you see it real quick, what it looks like. And then we're going to go from there. So if I take a look at the program, my player can move right, and he gets his right skin on, and left, and he moves on his left skin, and notice he's animated. And then if I move this way and I press the space bar, I shoot my enemy, which is Joey Chestnut, the world hot dog eating champion, and he disappears. And if I continue to the right, I can't get off the screen, no matter how hard I try. If I turn left and shoot Joey over here, he disappears. So that's the basic concept, and notice the background here. So that's the basic concept of what I want you to do. You can use any theme you want or any setup you want, but those are the things it needs to do. So in taking a look, notice we've got sprites, 1, 2, 3, 4, a vendor with a left skin, a hot dog, and the sprite of Joey Chestnut. Same thing, we've got the same objects down here, except for we've only got one object vendor, and we have him put on a left or right skin. So with that being said, well, let's go to room real quick, and here's the setup. I want to point out 2 things as I'm putting things in room. Number 1, up here where it says snap and this grid on and off, this controls how you move guys around. Notice that the movement is kind of jerky here. And also notice if I go to objects that I've scaled him down. I use this to scale Joey Chestnut down because the first one I have is too big. And I actually flip this X and the Y so he'd be facing the other way. So those are 2 things over here. However, if you want more fine movement, this snap down to 32 and 32, you could snap this all the way to 1 by 1. And now if I turn the grids on, it'd be really busy. I won't even do it. But what you can see here is I have fluid movement. I can put in whatever I want. You know, if I snap the grids to 8 by 8, you'd see a little difference here. Notice it'll still show you the grids at 8 by 8, and now he can move by 8. So that we haven't talked about before, and that'll give you a little bit easier movement to move on, put the grid on or off, change the snap to a lower number, and you have more freedom of movement. So with that being said, I want to look real quick at the difference between the depths. I had an issue at first with the hot dog vendor, and he was in front of the hot dog, and I wanted the hot dog in front in the picture. So I left him at his default depth of 0, but the hot dog, since I wanted to bring it forward, I put it at a depth of -1. So the larger the depth, the further it gets stacked back in your sprites. So again, if you want something towards the front of the screen, use a negative number, or at least one that's less than something you've already used. So without further ado, let's move on to the code. We're going to go to the vendor first, and I'm going to just outline in a step function, which means every 1/30th of a second, it'll read this. So every 1/30th of a second, do the following. So up here, we've defined variables right, left, and space, and the keyboard check. The difference between keyboard check and keyboard check pressed is this one says, as long as it's held down, it's true. This one says, as long as it was just held down a moment ago, it's true. So this will actually keep us from spamming hot dogs. You only spam 1 each time you hit the space bar. So if the right key is hit, this will be true. So if right is true, and this is the part where I kept him from leaving the room, if right is true and the X value is less than what we call room width, then add 2 every 1/30th of a second, and that controls speed. Set your image speed to 0.5. This will control how fast the animation runs. Notice my guy had a very slow movement, so I wanted his animation to slow down. So that's why I used less than. 1 would be 100%, 0.5 would be 50%. Sprite index would give you the skin he wears. Sprite vendor is my right-hand skin. And as you can see down here, if left is true, then I put him in my sprite vendor left, which is my left-hand skin. The differences in the X's is it's a negative instead of a X plus equals 2, it's a X minus equals 2. And this direction, I actually just defined a variable. 0 is right, 180 is left, and I'll show you something that sees that here in a minute. Let's go to this, and I'll show you this. So if we haven't covered this, 0 is to the right, 90 is up, 180 is to the left, and 270 is down. So I'm using this in something called dot notation to help control the hot dog. So if I go back to the project itself, notice if he's going left, I want his direction to say 180 degrees, which is going to make the hot dog go left. If he's going right, I want the direction to say 0 degrees, which means the hot dog is going right. Last but not least, I did stop the image speed if left plus right equals 0, because that way it stops the animation if the figure is stationary. And also, if spacebar, then I said instance create, X, Y plus 17, object hot dog. Now, normally this just creates at the center, but I didn't like it where it was at the center. I needed to move it down, and by down, that would be Y. And as strange as this may seem, plus 17 is actually down. So I moved that hot dog 17 pixels below the center of the object. So that's all the things for that. Let's go ahead and look at the coding here for a moment for object hot dog. In a create function, not too much going on here. I just initialized a variable that we called direction, and I set it equal 0. That actually the system understands this variable called direction, and I just wanted to initialize it. The hot dog was way too big, so I wanted to change its size to fit that with the other sprites. So I just scaled this down. Again, equals 1 would be 100%, equals 0.1 is 10%. The direction here was the way I told the hot dog which way to go. I set the direction equal to, and this is called dot notation. I said, which object do we want to look at right now? I want to identify with object vendor. And if I put dot direction, it means look at object vendor's variable called direction and set that equal to direction. So this is where I showed you in that other one, which is going to give him direction. So that dot notation in this case is used for that to take the object vendor's direction and give it on to the hot dog. And I just gave it initial speed of 20. And that's all the coding is in the hot dog. And then object chestnut, I just put a step function, and it says if place meeting x, y, comma, object hot dog, then instance destroy. We can do a lot of other things here, such as animations and sounds and scores, but for right now, I think just destroying him is going to be what we need to do. And so that's it for the video today, and hopefully you're able to get this project done today, and we're moving on. Thanks.